Let me ask you something. Ever felt like managers are these all-knowing superhumans who always have the perfect answer, the perfect plan, the perfect pep talk for every situation? No pressure, right? Or how about this? You think once you're promoted to a manager, you've got to suddenly become the boss of bosses, controlling every decision like some kind of all-seeing overlord. So if you ever felt like you don't fit the mold of what a manager should be, well, guess what? Neither does the mold. Here's the thing. There are a lot of myths about what it takes to be a manager, and today we're going to bust them wide open. It's time to rethink everything. Let's start with this big one, myth of all myths. Managers know everything. Once you step into that manager role, you're supposed to instantly become a walking encyclopedia, a human Google, and apparently a mind reader too. People think you should know everything, from the smallest project detail to the exact number of paper clips in the supply closet. Wouldn't that be great? Just put on your manager badge and ding, instant genius. Well, no, that's not how it works. Let's talk about why managers don't know everything and why that's actually okay. Where did this myth come from? It's probably started way back when the manager was the most experienced person in the room. You know, back in the day, the boss was the one who'd been there the longest, knew how to fix the machines, and probably had some epic beard that commanded respect. But nowadays, workplaces have changed. We live in a world of hyper-specialization. Your team might have experts in data analysis, design, coding, HR, well, you name it. So if you're a manager, that's pretty much impossible for you to know everything about everything your team does. And here's the fun part, you're not supposed to. The reality is, managers don't know everything, and that is okay. Let me paint a picture for you. When I first became a manager, I thought, well, I've been promoted, so I better act like I know what I'm doing. So naturally, I found myself in meetings nodding along like I understand everything, even when I didn't have a clue what was going on. Spoiler alert, it did not work. I looked like a bobblehead, just nodding to fit in. And you know what? It was exhausting. It was exhausting pretending to know everything. I quickly learned that faking it wasn't going to help me or my team. Let me tell you about a manager we will call Lisa. Lisa was recently promoted from a technical role into management. She was great at her job before, but now suddenly she's managing a team with different specialties. Marketing, finance, operations. And here's the catch, Lisa's background was in engineering. So naturally, her first instinct was to try and learn everything her team did, thinking she needed to be the expert in all areas. It wasn't long before Lisa felt overwhelmed and started questioning her abilities. She ended up drowning in information, trying to understand every little detail. And guess what? That wasn't even her job. Her job was to lead, not to become a master of every domain her team worked in. What's the takeaway here? Being a manager isn't about knowing everything. It's about leveraging your team's expertise. Your job is to set the direction, create a positive environment, and let your team's experts, do what they do best. It's like being a coach. You don't need to be the fastest player on the team, you need to empower the fastest player to do their thing. Trust me, your team will appreciate it if you let them shine. And there's more. Managers who admit they don't know everything are seen as more authentic and build stronger relationships with their teams. Strategies to succeed when you don't know everything. Okay, so you're a manager, you've accepted the fact that you don't know everything, then what? Here are some strategies to help you lead without being a walking encyclopedia. First, be curious. Don't be the know-it-all. Instead of trying to have all the answers, ask more questions. Curiosity will take you a lot further than pretending to be the all-knowing wizard. Try saying, "What do you think is the best approach here?" rather than acting like you have the answers. Next, delegate to experts. This is about trusting your team. They're there because they know things you don't. That's a good thing. Next time a question comes up, question in an area where your team member is the expert, defer to them. Let them lead the discussion. Next, create a culture of collaboration. Make it clear that your team's success comes from working together. When people feel like they can contribute their expertise, it makes the whole team stronger. Host regular brainstorming sessions where your team can bring their ideas to the table. You'll be amazed at how much smarter you will look when you let your team shine. Remember, it's okay not to have all the answers. Just make sure you're surrounded by the people who do. Okay, let's tackle myth number 2, and that's a classic one. Managers must always be in charge. Yep, we're talking about the idea that once you become a manager, you've got to be like some kind of all-powerful emperor, sitting on a throne, controlling every decision, making sure your team follows your commands to the letter. Let me say this. If you're trying to manage like an emperor, you will end up like the emperor with no clothes. Yeah, not going to work. Management isn't about control. It's about empowering your team. Let's break down why being in charge all the time is not only exhausting, but also a fast track to driving your team crazy. This myth probably started because, let's face it, the idea of a boss has historically been seen as someone in control. The boss barks orders, makes all the decisions, and everyone else is just supposed to follow along like obedient little, robots. But here's the thing, times have changed. These days, people don't want to be told what to do like they're in a Simon Says game. They want to contribute, make decisions, and take ownership of their own work. The reality is, managers don't have to be in charge all the time. Here's the truth, trying to control everything is a one-way ticket to a burnout town. Sure, you can tell everyone what to do and micromanage every decision, but pretty soon you'll be overwhelmed. Your team will be disengaged, and you'll be wondering why everyone's avoiding eye contact when you're in meetings. I mean, no one wants to work in that environment, and you don't want to be that manager. Instead, real management is about stepping back and giving your team freedom to make decisions. Your job is to guide, not dictate. Let me tell you about a manager we'll call Steve. Steve thought that being a manager meant being in charge of everything. So every day, Steve was on top of every little task. He'd tell his team exactly how to do the work, down to the tiniest detail, and then he would follow up with a million questions about every step of the process. At first, the team tried to go along with it, but after a while they started to feel like they couldn't make any decisions without Steve's approval. They stopped being proactive, waited for his instructions, and eventually stopped caring. By the end of the month, Steve was drowning in stress and the team was ready to mutiny. Yeah, Steve learned the hard way that being in charge of everything doesn't make you a good manager. It makes you a bottleneck, and nobody likes bottlenecks. So what's the secret? Instead of trying to be in charge of everything, be in charge of creating an environment where your team can thrive. The best managers empower their teams to make decisions, take risks, and own their work. When you empower your team, they start taking responsibility for their own projects. And guess what? They'll do better work because they're actually invested in the outcome. Plus, you get to breathe a little and stop obsessively checking every detail. So it's a win-win. Let's look at some studies. Harvard Business Review found that managers who delegate and empower their teams experience better decision-making, higher creativity, and lower turnover rates. That's right, letting go is actually good for business. Are you ready to shift from being in charge to being an empowering manager? Here are some strategies that will make your life and your team's life way better. Number 1, delegate. Stop hoarding tasks like you're collecting Pokemon cards. Give your team the responsibility to handle projects on their own. Simply ask, who on the team can take this on? Next, set the vision, not the details. Your job is to set the destination, not micromanage how the team gets there. Get your team the big picture and let them figure out the route. Focus on discussing the goals, then ask your team to come up with their own strategies to achieve them. Third, trust your team's judgment. Yeah, this one is tough if you're used to being in control, but trusting your team will go a long way in building their confidence and improving results. Next time a decision needs to be made, instead of jumping in, ask, what do you all think we should do? Finally, give feedback and not orders. When things go off track, Don't swoop in like a superhero to fix everything. Give feedback that helps your team learn and grow from the experience. Remember, a great manager isn't the one barking orders from the top. They're the one guiding the team from sidelines and cheering them on as they succeed. Next, here we go with the third myth. A good worker will automatically become a good manager. So you're killing it at your job, climbing that ladder, and bam, next thing, someone is handing you the keys to a whole team and says, congratulations, you're a manager now. And you are like, what? Just because you're great at something doesn't mean you're automatically ready to lead a team doing that thing. Let's dig into why this is a myth that so many of us fall for. First of all, where does this idea even come from? Well, think about it. Most of us grow with the career ladder in mind. The higher you climb, the more successful you must be, right? And up near the top of the ladder, probably holding a cup of coffee and looking stressed, is a manager. So if you're doing great as an individual contributor, the next logical step is management, of course. But the reality is, management is just not more of the same work you've been doing. It's a completely different beast. Imagine this. You're a fantastic cyclist. Fast, efficient, always winning races. But then someone says, hey, now you're in charge of the whole team. Good luck. Suddenly, you're not just riding your bike, you're making sure everyone else stays on their bikes without falling over. And guess what? They all want to pedal in different directions. So now, well, you're pulling your hair out. There's a gap between doing the work and managing people. This is where so many companies go wrong. You could be the absolute best at doing your own work, but when you become a manager, you're suddenly responsible for other people's work. And guess what? It's not as easy as just telling them, hey, do like I do. According to the Harvard Business Review, a whopping 60% of new managers fail in their first 2 years. Why? Because they were promoted based on their technical abilities rather than their people skills. And Gallup found that only 1 in 10 people actually have the natural talent to be a manager. Those odds aren't great if you're betting on your superstar worker automatically becoming a superstar manager. To be a good manager, you need a totally different toolbox. You need to develop others, which means coaching, mentoring, and supporting them as they learn. And that requires patience, trust, and a whole lot of communication. You also need to start thinking big picture. As an individual contributor, you're focusing on your tasks. As a manager, you need to ask, how do I help my team align with our company's long-term goals? And trust me, that's a whole new ballgame. Here's a story about Sarah. Sarah was a high performer, but her company took a different approach. Before promoting her, they invested in management training. They didn't just toss her into the deep end. She learned how to delegate, coach her team, and handle conflicts effectively. Fast forward 2 years, and Sarah's team was the top performer in the company. And not because Sarah was doing all the work, but because she knew how to lead the team to success. So if you're ready to step into management, here are some survival strategies. First, master soft skills. Forget the megaphone. Your most powerful tool is listening. Start practicing empathy and active listening. Next time a team member has a problem, listen and ask instead of jumping in with your own solutions. Next, learn to delegate. Trust me, waving a magic wand to make everything happen yourself, while it sounds tempting, but delegation is where the real magic happens. Next, take a leadership course. Yes, even if you're naturally talented, learning how to lead is a skill you can hone. Sign up for a management workshop, read books on leadership, or shadow a great manager. Then, ask for feedback. Be brave enough to ask your team how you're doing as a leader. You can send out an anonymous survey asking for feedback. It might sting, but it will help you grow. So to bust this myth once and for all, being a great worker doesn't guarantee you'll be a great manager. It's like saying, I'm great at cooking, so obviously I will do as an amazing restaurant owner. It's not the same job. All right, we're diving into myth number 4. People are born to lead. Yep. According to this myth, if you didn't pop out of the womb giving TED Talks and organizing baby protests for better diaper quality, leadership just isn't in your DNA. I mean, come on, if you're not already a natural leader, should you just pack up and go home? Well, I'm here to tell you that this is a lot of nonsense. All right, so where did this myth come from? Some people think leadership is like a superpower. You either have it or you don't. Leadership is not something you're born with. It's something you build. And trust me, you can build it, even if you weren't the captain of your high school sports team. Here's the reality. Leadership isn't about some magical, mystical trait you either have or don't. It's a skill. It's like learning to play an instrument. You get better at it over time with practice, patience, and probably a few bumps in the road. You're not born shredding on the guitar. You learn how to strum, hit the right notes, and eventually you rock. Leadership is exactly the same. You'll hit some sour notes at first, but with practice, you'll hit that sweet spot. Let me introduce you to a guy we'll call Mike. Now, Mike wasn't exactly what you would call a natural leader. In fact, he was the guy who avoided the spotlight and just wanted to get his work done. But one day, Mike's boss came to him and said, "Mike, we think you could make a great team leader." And Mike was like, sure? An internal panic started. Yeah, Mike was not ready to give rousing speeches or inspire the masses, but here's what happened. Mike started small. He learned how to listen to his team, ask for feedback, and worked on building trust. Over time, he grew into the role. And before long, he wasn't just leading, he was thriving as a leader. Mike did not magically transform overnight, he learned to lead. And that's the key. Leadership is a process, not a birthright. Let's look at the data. Research from Harvard Business Review shows that only about 30% of leadership ability is genetic, which means a whopping 70% is developed through experience, training, and learning on the job. So even if you weren't born with leadership in your blood, you've got plenty of room to grow. Let's break down the skills you need to build to become a great leader. And I promise, none of these requires superhuman powers. First, communication. You don't need to give a speech worthy of an Oscar. Just be clear, open, and honest with your team. Practice giving clear feedback or instructions. Start small and work your way up to bigger conversations. Second is self-awareness. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses is key to improving as a leader. And no, that doesn't mean being perfect. Take 5 minutes at the end of each day to reflect, what went well, what could I do better next time? Next is empathy. Leadership is about understanding your team's needs and being supportive. Sometimes that's as simple as listening. Next time someone brings up a problem, focus on listening more than talking. Just understanding someone's perspective can make all the difference. And finally, decision-making. Leaders make tough decisions, tough choices, but don't worry, you will get better at it with practice. And you don't need to get every decision right. Just make sure that you learn from them. When faced with a decision, weigh the options and then decide. Don't let indecision hold you back. So to wrap this up, people are not born leaders, they become leaders. Leadership isn't some mystical quality that only a few lucky people have. It's a skill that can be developed by anyone who's willing to put in the time and effort. So if you're not a natural leader, don't sweat it. You've got all the tools you need to become a leader. You just need to start building those skills. All right, myth number 5. Managers must be outgoing extroverts. According to this myth, to be a successful manager, you've got to be the life of the party. Constantly talking, shaking hands, giving high fives, making inspirational speeches every morning while fireworks go off in the background. And that's just not true. Let me tell you, not every manager wants to be the office version of a motivational DJ, hyping everyone up every 5 minutes. And guess what? That's totally okay. You don't need to be an extrovert to be a great manager. So where did this myth come from? We often think as leaders as being these larger-than-life, charismatic people. You know the type. They can work a room, charm everyone, and make friends with a brick wall. But here's the reality. Some of the best managers are more on the quiet side. And no, that doesn't mean that they're awkwardly hiding in the corner during meetings. They're just leading in their own way. A way that works for them and their team. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be an effective leader. In fact, being a great manager is about how well you connect with your team, not how many words you can squeeze into a meeting or how much energy you bring to the office karaoke night. Being the quiet, steady presence can sometimes be more powerful. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah wasn't your typical loud, outgoing manager. In fact, she was pretty introverted. She wasn't the type to lead a pep rally. And she definitely did not get hyped up about public speaking. But here's what Sarah did. She listened to her team. She made one-on-one connections and created an environment where her team felt comfortable sharing ideas. Sarah did not need to be the loudest voice in the room. And you know what happened? Her team thrived. They felt heard, supported, and empowered to do their best work. Sarah's introverted approach worked because she wasn't trying to be something that she wasn't. She played to her strengths. Let's hit you with some stats. Harvard Business Review. They found that introverted managers can actually be more effective than extroverts when leading proactive teams. Why is that? Because introverts tend to listen more and encourage collaboration. They don't dominate the conversation. And according to a study by Wharton Business School, introverted leaders are especially successful when their teams are full of go-getters. Instead of trying to control everything, they create space for their team to shine, which leads to higher engagement and higher productivity. All right, if you're an introverted or non-extroverted manager, or if you just prefer a quieter approach, here are some strategies to help you lead like a pro. First, embrace your listening superpower. Yeah, it's a superpower actually. As a quieter manager, you're probably an amazing listener, which is a huge asset. During your next team meeting, focus on really listening to what your team has to say. Not just hearing them, but listening deeply. It will build trust faster than you think. Second, focus on one-on-one connections. Instead of trying to be the center of attention in large groups, build relationships in smaller settings. Your team will appreciate the personal connection. Schedule regular one-on-ones with your team members to check in on their progress and listen to their feedback. Then, there is leading by example. Let your actions speak for you. Your team will respect you for it. Instead of telling your team how to handle a situation, model your behavior the way you want to see it. Your leadership will speak volumes. And finally, empower your team to really take charge. Don't feel like you need to control every conversation or decision. Give your team the space to step up and take the lead. So to wrap this up, managers do not have to be outgoing extroverts. You don't need to be the loudest, most energetic person in the room to be a great leader. In fact, quiet, thoughtful managers are often some of the best because they focus on listening, empowering others, and leading by example. And there you have it, folks. We've just busted 5 biggest myths about management. Let's do a quick recap to make sure none of these myths sneak back into your mind. Managers know everything. Well, no, you're not walking Wikipedias. A great manager leans on their team and keeps learning. Managers must always be in charge. Being in control of everything, that's how you become a bottleneck, not a leader. Step back and let your team shine. A good worker will automatically become a good manager. Sorry, just because you're awesome at your job doesn't mean you'll crush it as a manager. Leadership is a different skill set and it takes time to develop. People are born to lead. Well, no. Babies aren't born with leadership genes. Leadership is learned through experience and growth. Trust me, even the best leaders had their awkward phase. Managers must be outgoing extroverts. No, you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to lead. Sometimes the quietest voice makes the biggest impact. So if you've been feeling like you don't fit the stereotypical manager mold, good news. That mold doesn't really exist. The best managers are the ones who learn, listen, empower, and lead in their own way. And that could be you. Now I want to hear from you. Which myth surprised you the most? Drop a comment below, and if you enjoyed this myth-busting session, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and remember, great managers are not born, they're made. So go out there, lead with confidence, and I'll see you in the next one.